Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this tutorial, I want to show you how you can create RESTful API using Express framework. We know the meaning of API and RESTful API. Now the time is to understand how to create this API using a server. If you don't know what is API and RESTful API, then click on the link at the top right corner of the screen. Once you know what is RESTful API, now let's understand how to create RESTful API. RESTful API enables you to develop any kind of web applications having all possible CRUD operations, just like create, retrieve, update, and delete. To create a RESTful API, we're going to use Express framework. So let's first understand what is Express framework. You're probably aware that JavaScript is a programming language most often used to add interactivity to the front end of the website. But its capability go far beyond that. An entire site can be built on JavaScript, extending it from front-end to back-end seamlessly. Express is a fast, essential, and moderate web application of Node.js. Express and Node.js gave JavaScript newfound back-end functionality, allowing developers to build software with JavaScript on the server side. Express is a Node.js web application server framework, which is specially designed to build single-page, multi-page, and hybrid web applications. To use Express, we first need to install Node.js in our system. I already installed Node.js in my system, so I don't need to install Node.js again. If you don't, then install it from nodejs.org website. So just open the browser and just type www.nodejs.org and press enter. So you're in the Node.js website, so just download the Node.js depending on your system. Once you've done that, you can now install Node packages using npm command. So using npm command, you can initialize your project and install various Node packages. Now, let's create a new project and initialize it with npm. So I'm going to just open the Visual Studio Code and just create a new project here. So I'm going to create a new directory and name this directory RESTful. And just open the command prompt. So I'm going to just press Ctrl tilde to open the command prompt. And as you can see, I have this bash shell open in my Visual Studio Code. I'm using the git bash shell to execute commands. I'm going to just initialize this application. So I'm going to just change the directory. So I'm going to say change directory and just say here RESTful and press enter. Once I change this directory, I'm going to just initialize this directory with npm. So I'm going to say here npm init and press enter. So when you press enter, npm asks a few questions. So these questions is not necessary, but if you want, you can answer them whatever you want. So the first question is your package name. So I'm going to just specify my package name here. So I'm going to say here RESTful. Then the version, I'm going to press enter here to choose default value. I'm going to specify the description. So I'm going to say here creating RESTful API. Then press enter. Specify the entry point. I'm going to leave this as it is. Test command, git repository. Then I will leave keywords as well. And then specify author. So I'm going to say here Daily Tuition. Press enter. Specify the license. So I'm going to specify MIT and specify is this okay. Then I will say yes here. Once I press enter, you can see here I have package.json file. Right? In this file, you have your name of your project, the version, description, the entry point, different scripts, and the author and the license. Now, once I initialize my project with package.json file, I'm going to just install Express framework in this application. So I'm going to just open the terminal, clear the console, and just say here npm node package manager install. So I'm going to just say here I and just specify what module you want to install. So I want to install the Express framework. So I'm going to say here Express. And I want to save this framework in dependencies. So I'm going to say here --, save, and just press enter to install this Express framework in your application. It will take few minutes to install this module in your application depending on your internet speed. Now as you can see, this framework is installed in our application. Now let's create our first server with Express framework. So I'm going to just close this terminal and here I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to name this file server.js. And in this file, I'm going to create new Express server. Now let's create a new server in server.js file. So I'm going to just first include the Express module in this file. So I'm going to just say here constant express is equal to require express. Now just after that, I'm going to just create here a constant variable port and just specify the port name here 3000. So I want to serve this application on the port 3000, right? So I'm going to just create an instance of the application. So I'm going to just create here a command and just say app instance, and just create here a constant app is equal to express. Now just after that, I'm going to say app dot listen. I want to specify the port here. I want to listen this application on the 3000 port. So I'm going to just specify here the port name and the callback function. So I'm going to call here function, and in this function I'm going to just say console.log, and in the backtick I'm going to say app is running on port 3000. Save the changes and just open the terminal, clear the console. Now to execute this application, you just need to say npm start. But before you execute this command, make sure you have this server.js file in the root folder of your application. If you don't have this file in the root folder, this command is not going to work and you're going to get an error message. So keep in mind, create this server.js file in the root directory. Now to execute this application, just say npm start and press enter. So when you press enter, you can see you have this app is running on the port 3000. Now if you open this port, you're going to get your application. So if I just open the browser, if I just say here localhost 3000, then I'm going to get my application here. But at this time, this is going to say cannot get, because you didn't send any response to this URL. To send the response, I'm going to just open this file and just say here app.get. I'm going to call the HTTP get method, then specify the route. So I'm going to just specify / here. We're going to understand what is the route and all that in a few minutes. But before that, I'm going to just send the response. So I'm going to just specify the route here and then call the handler function. I'm going to create two parameters. The first one is request and second one is response. And just after that, in this function, I'm going to say response.send. And I want to send here hello world. Save the changes and just execute this npm command again. Now the downside of executing this npm start command is whenever you make any changes in the file, you need to restart your server. So to solve this problem, I have nodemon module. The nodemon module used to restart the server whenever we make any changes in the file. So we don't need to execute this command again and again. So I'm going to just press Ctrl C here and just install npm nodemon. And I'm going to save this as dev dependency, right? Now as you can see, this module is installed in our system. Clear this terminal and just close it and open the package.json file, and in the script section right here, I'm going to create a new script start and specify nodemon server.js. So this is going to execute the server.js file and restart the server whenever we make any changes in this file. Save the changes and just open the terminal and just say npm start. You can see here nodemon is watching your server.js file and start your application on 300 port. So whenever you make any changes in your server.js file, if I just press Ctrl S and save my file, you can see you have restarting due to the changes, and the nodemon is restart your server, and you can see here a message app is running on the port 3000, right? So nodemon restarted your server on the port 3000. So you don't need to execute this npm start command again and again. Now just open the browser and on the localhost 3000, if you reload your application, you can see hello world message because we sent the response with the send function, right? Now as you can see, we successfully started our server. Now let's create our first API endpoint. But before we move on, I want to explain what is routing. So I'm going to just create here a comment. Routing refers for determining the way in which an application responds to the client request to a particular endpoint. For example, client can make get, post, put or delete HTTP request for various URL. Now suppose I make a get request on this URL. Now if a get request is made for this URL, then the response should ideally be a list of books. So based on the URL which is accessed, a different functionality on the web server will be invoked and accordingly the response will be sent to the client. So this is the concept of routing. Each route can have one or more handler function which are executed when the route is matched. At this point you can see I have this / refers to the route path. So when the route is matched, I want to execute this function. So as you can see here, so when the route is matched with the route path, I'm going to execute the function. Now let's create our first RESTful API endpoint. But before we create our first endpoint, I want to explain what is the meaning of this parameter. The first, we have the request parameter. The request parameter has information about the request being made. And the second, we have response parameter. The response parameter which can be used to send information back to the clients. That is why we use this request and the response parameter. So as you can see here, with this response parameter, we can send this message to the client. Let's create our first endpoint. So I'm going to specify here a get request. So I'm going to create a get request with the path to-dos, right? Now if the URL is matched with this path, I'm going to execute this function. Now I'm going to get rid of this response. Now what I want to send the resources with this endpoint. Now the resources can be anything. It may be image, video, text message, or anything. I want to return an array with this endpoint. So I'm going to just create here a new folder and name this folder db. And in this folder, I'm going to create a new file and name this file db.js. So this is a mimic of database. So I'm going to create a mimic record of database. So I'm going to just create here a constant variable to-dos and initialize this variable with an array. And in this array, I'm going to specify different data. Now in this array on the 0 index, I'm going to create an object. So I'm going to just specify curly braces here and just create few properties and values. So I'm going to just quickly copy and paste few properties and values here. So as you can see here, I have ID 1, title user 1, description, and the status. Now I'm going to just specify the second value as well. So I'm going to specify comma here and specify curly braces and just paste my second index and just change this ID to 2. User is going to be 2 and the status is false. And just after that, I'm going to just export this information. So I'm going to say here module.exports. And in the curly braces, I'm going to say to-dos. And just after that, open the server.js file. And here, I'm going to first include this db.js module. So I'm going to just say here constant db is equal to require. In the single quote, I'm going to say specify the root path, the db folder, and db.js file. Just after that, I want to share this information with the client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say here response.json, and in the JSON I'm going to just pass this data. So I'm going to just say here db. I'm going to just convert this response in the JSON format and share with the client, right? Save the changes and open the browser. If we reload this application at this URL, you're going to get an error because we don't have any route with this path. Now if I just specify here / and say to-dos and press enter, I'm going to get this information. So as you can see, I have this database information on my document. Now this is not the best way to test your endpoint. To test your API endpoint, we need a tool that tests API endpoint. To solve this problem, we have Postman. But we don't know what is Postman. Wait, let me explain what is Postman. Postman is an API testing tool. Postman is a Google Chrome application for testing API calls. Postman is a powerful tool used to test web services. It was developed for sending HTTP requests in a simple and a quick way. You can download this Postman from getpostman.com. So in the URL, just say getpostman.com and just download this Postman in your local system. I already installed this application in my local system, so I'm going to just quickly open Postman too. Now once you install this Postman and open it, you can see this type of interface. Now once you open this Postman, you need to inform the Postman which type of HTTP request you are going to make. So I'm going to make a get request, so I'm going to say here get, right? And here I'm going to just specify the endpoint of my RESTful API. So I'm going to just say here localhost 3000, the port name and the endpoint. So I'm going to say here to-dos. Now to execute this endpoint, I'm going to just click on this send button. So when I click on the send button, I'm going to get here a result. So as you can see here, I have my database right here. So using this endpoint, I'm going to get this data. So to test your API, this is the best way. Now once we create the GET request, now let's create a new route with POST request. To handle the HTTP POST request in Express version 4 and above, you need to install middleware module called body parser. But what is body parser? Body parser is a module used to extract the entire body portion of an incoming request stream and expose it on request.body. This middleware is a part of Express earlier, but now you have to install it separately. This body parser module parses the JSON, buffer, string and URL encoded data submitted using HTTP POST request. So in short, we use body parser to submit data with the POST request. So I'm going to just install this body parser using npm in my application. So I'm going to just open my terminal. I will leave this terminal as it is and open my new terminal. So I'm going to click here new terminal. Before you execute any command, you can see I have this tutorial folder. I'm going to change this directory. I'm going to change the directory to RESTful and just install body parser module here. So I'm going to say here npm install body parser and just save it as dependency, right? Now as you can see, this body parser is installed. I'm going to just clear the screen, close this terminal. Here I'm going to just include this body parser in my application. So I'm going to open the server.js file and just see here constant body parser is equal to require, and I'm going to specify here a module name. So I'm going to say here body parser, right? Now just after this application, I'm going to just call app.use. I'm going to call this body parser middleware. So I'm going to just say here app.use and just call body parser.json. Now just after that, what I want, I'm going to make a post request. So I'm going to create here a command and say make post request, right? So I'm going to create a new endpoint of the post request. I'm going to say here app.post, and at the first argument I'm going to first specify the endpoint. So I'm going to specify the single quote / and say here API to do's, right? Just after that, I'm going to call the handler function with request and response parameter. When the route match with this path, I'm going to execute this function. Now this is the post request. So what I want to post data with this request. That is why I use body parser to pass data with this post request. To do that, I'm going to just say here if request.body and create a property here title. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass data with this title variable. So if this variable is not initialized, then I'm going to initialize this variable. So I'm going to say here request.body.title and initialize this variable with the data new data, right? Just after that, I'm going to say if request.body.description is not initialized, then I'm going to say request.body.description and initialize this description variable with data. So I'm going to just say here data provided from post request, right? Now just after that, now at this time we are going to pass this data with these hard-coded values. Instead of specifying these hard-coded values, you can specify input text box value also. Now just after that, I'm going to create here constant data is equal to id 1 + 1. Then I'm going to specify the title, and the value of this title is coming from this variable. So I'm going to just say here request.body.title. Then I'm going to just specify here description, and the value is going to be request body.description, right? And the status is going to be false. And just after that, I want to send the response with this post method. So I'm going to say here response.json and just specify here data. Now let me open this endpoint in the browser. So I'm going to just open the browser, and in the URL, I'm going to just say here API/to-dos. So when I press enter, I'm going to get this error message. So you can see you are not able to test your post request in the browser. In that situation, the Postman help you out. So I'm going to just open the Postman application, and in this URL, I'm going to just select the post request. So I'm going to just click here and say post. And I'm going to just change this URL and just specify my endpoint of my post request. So I'm going to just say here localhost 3000 API to-dos. So when I send this request, I'm going to get a response. So as you can see, I have this response with this JSON data. So in this response, you can see you have ID 2, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, then the title, which is the new data, as you can see here, and the description. So as you can see, we successfully created our first basic RESTful API. So using RESTful API, you can share resources with different applications. You are not limited to just send get and post requests. You can send put, delete, patch, and header request as well. We will understand this request by creating a simple project using Express. So I hope you understand how to create a simple RESTful API. Practice with this example to understand this RESTful API easily. That is all for now. If you have any question, you can ask me anytime in the comment box. Like this video if you find anything useful. Subscribe for more videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next tutorial.